InfoPath forms are great ways to capture information from a user. They can be presented to the user as a web form directly within a SharePoint site. User can fill out this form and it gets submitted to the form library in your site. The form library then has the capability to route that form for approval using a workflow. SharePoint Designer can be used to create that workflow. However, you can also start, if you wish, from Visio, Microsoft Visio. If you are a business analyst, for example, you might want to start over there. So you create your workflow in the Visio environment and export it out. That exported file can then be imported into SharePoint Designer and attached directly to the form library that contains the InfoPath form. The workflow rules can then be configured directly into SharePoint Designer and then published to the form library. All this is demonstrated in this video. First thing I want to show you is this InfoPath form. It's called the training request form. The name field it cannot be blank, basically the way it's configured right now. The department has some choices. The drop down has HR, marketing, IT, sales. The training requested has some training choices for the user, SharePoint, Cold Fusion, SAP. And the date and time field in this form has a default value of now, which provides the current date and time. What I want to do now is go to the File menu and publish it out to the SharePoint server. So I'll click on SharePoint server. It's going to ask me where do you want to publish it. I'll go to the site that I want to publish it to. Take the URL for this site. Copy it to my clipboard, and in InfoPath, put in this URL. Next, it's going to ask me how do you want to publish this form, and I'll say publish it as a form library. Another more powerful way of doing this is publishing it as a site content type. But we're going to talk about form library in this video. So I'll click on next and then say create a form library. And then I'll name this form library that will get eventually created by this form. It's going to be called training request. Description is just fill out this form to request training, basically. Then next. Now here are some fields which are in the form right now, and they will get promoted as columns in the form library. And these, if they were not configured, you would click on the add button and configure each one of them. Just pick each of the fields on the form that you want to get promoted, that you want to appear as columns in the library. I'll click on next, then publish. Okay, I'm going to close this, go to my site and verify it's there. So I'll just refresh this page, and here we go. My training request appears now. Here are my columns that got promoted: department, date, time, training requested, and employee name. These are the 4 columns that I chose to get promoted to as columns. And I'm going to go to the library settings and then advanced settings, and just make sure that this form always opens up in the browser. So I'll click on that selection to open it up in the browser. I'll go back to the library, click on document, and just new document to verify if it's working properly. Here it is, it's in the web browser. Okay, so I'm going to close it. Now the next thing I want to do is go to Visio, and in Visio there's a new stencils, set of stencils that are for SharePoint workflow. I'll click on new, and under the flowchart category you'll find the SharePoint workflow stencil. So this is a business analyst now creating a new SharePoint workflow using the stencils in Visio. There's actions, there's conditions, and then there's the terminators for starting and beginning the workflow. I'll take this start component, that should always be at the start of the workflow, and I'll take the terminate as well, and I'll put that at the end of the workflow. And in the middle I'm going to actually define my workflow. Here's all the different actions that are available on this server. I'll pick the send an email action. Okay, and next I'm going to go to conditions and pick the compare data source condition. Then back to actions, I'll pick the send an email again, and I'm not hooking these up right now. Of course, I'm just putting the components, all the different actions and conditions onto my Visio page. Then I'll go ahead and configure them later, or connect them later. I'll take the set workflow status action as well. I'll leave that, and then this stop workflow action. This stop workflow action is a little bit different from that last stop workflow terminator, because the stop workflow terminator just is the endpoint for the workflow, and the stop workflow action lets me choose the stop. Well, it's going to get translated into the stop workflow action in SharePoint Designer, and will also let me log a message to the history list, which is different from the other terminator for stop workflow. Now I'll take the assign a to-do item action. Then the set workflow status action. Okay, so I want to start connecting these things together now. Pretty easy. Whenever I go to an object, it gives me those arrows, and I can choose, click on the arrow, and just go to the next object, and it connects it to it. Pretty simple to do. Always want to make sure that my last object connects to the stop workflow terminator. That has to be the case. Okay, now, because it's a conditional block, the compare data source, I need to pick the yes and no option. So I'm right-clicking on actually these lines over here, and what I did was I clicked on yes for one of them, and then no for the other one. So if the compare data source, whatever I configure it to be, if that equivalence, if this equals to yes, then it goes to send an email. If it's no, then it's going to be assigning a to-do item. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm just saving it as a regular Visual Studio, regular Visio diagram. It's called training request process.vsd. Oh, I forgot one of them. I need to also, of course, connect the beginning terminator to send an email. Make sure everything is connected. Okay. Now I'm going to save it again and export it. Here we go. It gets exported as a VWI Visio Workflow Interchange file. And I'll call it training request process.vwi. And now it's going to be saved. So my next process here, my next step here is to go to my sales site in my SharePoint Designer environment, and in there I'm going to import the workflow. So I'll go to the import section, click on import from Visio. I need to import the exact file, of course, the VWI file that I exported from Visio. This could be a developer doing this, for example. And I'm going to click on the training request. That's what I want to attach to. Of course, the training request is my library that has all my forms. Click on finish, and here we go. Now it has all the different actions and conditions that I had that I designed in my Visio environment, or that a business analyst had this environment in here in SharePoint Designer. Now I still need to configure these rules, so I'm clicking on the email rule and configuring this to send the email to the user who created the item.